Congressman John Fleming of Louisiana. He also happens to be a medical doctor. And Congressman, as a medical doctor, we're talking about the accounting here, and we'll get to that in a second. But as a doctor, what concerns you most about this new law?
Thanks, David, for having me on. David, what concerns me as a physician is the fact that these are maybe phony numbers and they're abstract concepts in Washington, but they're going to have a day-to-day real impact on the very patients that I see in my clinic, that every person across America is going to have to deal with. So it has a very real impact. Really, when you think about it, it has the most intimate contact with the American people of any program in Washington.
Yeah. Now, has Kathleen Sebelius come back, or somebody from the White House, to kind of elaborate on her answer that somehow this $500 billion came from the same place and is going to the same place or whatever?
Well, not at all, David. We've been chasing Secretary Sebelius down for over a year and other members of the administration on this very issue. And it wasn't until Republicans took control of the House and we actually had subpoena power and could force her to come in and answer these questions. And after all of that, all we got was a one-word answer, and that is both, which is essentially like saying that I can go to the local dealership for an automotive car, and I can simply order 2 cars for the price of 1. That's exactly what's going on in Washington.
And it's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, there are more, hundreds of billions more in this double accounting than have been reckoned with. For one thing, as a doctor, I'm sure you're interested in the doctor fix, which, of course,
yes,
is a sort of a temporary way to get around not paying doctors what they should be paid for their care
right.
for Medicare patients. Every year we go ahead with this fix, and that was not accounted in this new Obamacare program. Has it been?
Hasn't. It was originally in it, but once, as you may recall during the debate, that Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid kept sending pieces of legislation to the CBO and getting things back. What they were doing was manipulating the budget window for this, that 10-year window, and they found that the $300 billion needed for the doctor fix, there's no way that could be fit in there. Also, the $10 billion to hire thousands of new IRS agents to enforce this, that was taken out. Comparative effectiveness, it goes on and on and on, David. And then on top of that, remember that there's 10 years of revenue from new taxes against 6 years of expenses.
Right. That is the
yes.
big kahuna, and that's the one that Paul Ryan was really talking about. When you have not only 10 years of taxes, but also 10 years of Medicare cuts and only 6 years of spending. When you have 10 years
yeah.
of revenue stream as opposed to 6 years of going out, you're bound to make things balance, even though they don't.
Yes, and then finally there's a Ponzi scheme in there, the so-called Class Act, which is a voluntary program that people can actually purchase insurance for their long-term care later in life, and those dollars are immediately swept into Obamacare, and then when you get ready to have those premiums pay off for you, the money's not going to be there. It'll have to go back to the taxpayers once again.
All right. Well, this tells us so much, by the way, about this law that, again, nobody really read or understood before it was passed. And of course, it was jammed down our throats. But the fact is, it's so big, it's so monstrous in its implications, and so badly put together in its accounting errors. There must be somebody on the Democratic side who's admitting that these things need to be fixed.
Well, David, if you could find that person, I would certainly like to know who it is, because they have stymied us at any mission. We're constantly being accused of scare tactics when we talk about these things, but yet we keep bringing it out. Every promise the president has made, such as the premiums would go down, has been broken. They've been going up. We know this is going to be bureaucratic. People come to me all the time and say, well, will you fix this and that and so forth? And I tell them, all of this now has been put under Health and Human Services and CMS, and now they're going to make the decision. So now we're talking about unelected bureaucrats that are nameless that are going to be making all of these decisions.
Yeah, and then you have the president, and the president, of course, it is his biggest achievement so far after 2.5 years in the presidency. He clearly doesn't want to change anything in this bill. He's very proud of it as it is. But when he sees Sebelius say something like she said, when you see all these other fixes and these accounting tricks, even the CBO, by the way, this is something Paul Ryan pointed out, even though they did account it as not adding to the deficit, because of all the assumptions, the bad assumptions that they had to make about it, they did see it as adding to the debt. So how something cannot add to the debt, even though or not add to the deficit, even though it's adding to the debt, is beyond me. But is there any way that change can be implemented with a president that is as intransigent as this one?
David, I can see no way to deal with or fix this bill, this law now, in any way other than defunding it and ultimately repealing it. Remember that not one single Republican voted for it. The American people have been against it from the very start and continue to be. The only way we can solve this problem is to defund it and ultimately have it repealed, and to start over, make it bipartisan, passing individual pieces of legislation targeted to the actual problems, making it patient-centered and market-oriented. That's the only way we're ever going to get cost control, create a competitive atmosphere where costs go down and quality goes up. David, there's no shortcut to this. We've got to completely do away with Obamacare. And what's interesting, one more thing, is that even though we call it Obamacare, you would think the president would be proud of it, but the Democrats in the House, like Wasserman Schultz, complains that we're using derogatory language. So what does that tell you what they think about their own legislation?
Right. Doctor, we have to run. I'm getting a wrap, but I just have to ask you quickly. Do you know any doctors that are so frustrated by the buildup of bureaucracy in health care that they're thinking of quitting?
Yes, I do. I know a number of them, David, and it's also feeding down to the medical students who are saying, really, am I getting into the right thing here? It's going to really hurt us when it comes to doctor shortages in the out years with Obamacare.
Congressman and Dr. John Fleming, great to see you. Thank you for coming in.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.